Welcome back to Project XJ. In this video, we're going to be installing frame stiffeners. We're also going to be replacing the rock sliders. We're going to replace the rocker panels with 2x6 quarter wall rectangular tubing. I have some 2x6 3/16 wall that I'm going to make the supports for the rock sliders out of. These are my Smitty-built bumper brackets, and as you can see, there's an extra hole down here, so I made this piece. I'm going to weld it to the frame stiffener so that I'll have 4 holes to mount the bumper to. So it should be just as strong as it was. A little bit stronger. These, you can see there's a little bit more material on the frame stiffener, and it'll be welded to the frame instead of bolted. So it should be stronger. The frame stiffeners wrap around the frame. They plate this side and underneath. So I need to remove these lower control arm brackets. And I got this piece off already on the side to just drill out the spot welds and then yank it off. So I'm halfway through this piece. You can see I'm drilling them out, and then I'll just clean it up and be able to weld the frame stiffener to the unibody. Next, I removed the existing rock sliders and cut off the plates that were welded to the frame and ground them smooth. After I cut off the old rock sliders, I needed to clean up the unibody frame rail in order to weld on the frame stiffeners. So now that I've got everything cleaned up, I've got the paint stripped, I got the brackets removed, I have my rock slider brackets removed all the way down. I used the steering box bolts to locate this front frame stiffener, and then I'm gonna place the other ones, next to these all the way back. I had to do a little grinding on here to get this to sit up flush and not hit up against this extra piece of metal up here. But you can see I got the paint away through all the welds, everywhere it's going to be welded. And I'm going to C-clamp it to the frame to suck it up tight. Make sure that it's really tight before I weld it on there. These are the other 2 pieces. This one fits right here, definitely needs to be pressed on. And then this one fits right here. and then the last one down here. On the driver's side, you will need to trim some of the extra metal for the track bar bracket in order for one of the frame stiffener pieces to fit. I marked it and took my time and cut it and didn't even nick the frame. After tracing all the pieces onto the frame and cleaning them up and locating the very front piece with bolts, the bumper bolts, and other bolts in the body, I was ready to weld. So I started welding from the front on this plate. I bolted everything in to locate the plate exactly where it should go, tightened it up, and started welding that. And then I welded in this plate because where it fits, you can tell exactly where it goes. Get this hole lined up, get that hole lined up, and then fitting these two in between is kind of the hardest part. This seam along the edge on the bottom is probably the hardest weld. You have a lot to fill in right here. I need to clean up some of the welds, just kind of make them a little bit flatter, prettier. And then I'm going to paint the whole thing. I just take a flat disc, sandpaper flat disc, like a 120 grit, and go over the whole thing, get all the spatter and dirt off of it. And then I'm going to put some rust paint and probably fill in with some silicone the edges just to keep water out as much as possible. It's still going to get in between right here, but it has little holes that allow the water to drip out. I did leave this last edge unwelded so that when I do the next frame stiffener here on the edge, the weld won't be in the way of the next piece that goes on. This side was a little bit harder to get the steering box bolts in there. Had to use the jack under here to get the spacer and the box and the bolt all lined up. But I tightened those down pretty well to keep this in place. I already sanded down this side and just put down a light coat, and I'm letting that dry before I put on the next coat of paint. I decided to try this Rust Performer. It says it does well on metal and it's paintable, and any rust that I didn't get up here, it's supposed to keep it from rusting more. And I'm gonna cover pretty well everything in this truck bed. It does okay with heat. It's not heat specific, but I've used it other places around the engine compartment. It does good. And it's pretty tough, so I have a few cans of this that I'll be using to paint the inner fender and the frame stiffener. This is the little bracket that holds the track bar bracket on. It goes through the frame and sticks out, and then the track bar bracket goes on there. I did preemptively go and get a little bit longer bolt if I have to use it. I might end up using a thin piece of metal like this to make my own piece that goes right here. I'm going to try to use this first, and if not, I'll make something like this with the longer bolt. These are grade 8, and it's the same size nut. These nuts were like $4 a piece, so I decided to just reuse the stock ones. Okay, so this is the stock bumper bolt. It had these little clips that went over the end of the frame, and the bolt went through and threaded on this little nut on the back side. So really wasn't that strong. There were 2 of those, and then this one nut that there's a nut welded on the back side of the frame right here where that screw goes in, or bolt goes into, right here. But my bumper came with these bolts, which, when you compare them, you know, this one right here is much bigger. So that goes through here, and a nut goes on the back side. So now I have 1, 2, 3. I welded on this little plate here. So I can put my 4th bolt. So I'll have 1 stock one, and then 3 of these larger bolts to hold my bumper on. So it'll be stronger than it was before, which is the whole point of this. Frame stiffening, stronger bumper. I want everything to be as strong as possible. So here you can see the front after everything's been painted. Did the wheel wells and the frame stiffeners on both sides. I did a couple of coats, made sure everything was covered really well, and I think it turned out really good. This is the whole reason for me getting frame stiffeners. I've always wanted them, but this pushed me over the edge. I was out playing on the rocks, and I got a nice big dent in the frame. Moving on to the rear is a lot easier than the front. It's fewer pieces, and they're longer. You don't have to remove as much stuff to get to them. So I did have to take off my cross member since I have the long arm that you have to pull everything off. And just go slow, weld everything on. When you're done welding it up, you do have to space the cross member. Because of the plates on the side of the frame, I had to elongate all the holes, and I did have to drill out a few of the holes, like where the skid plate mounts on the frame, but everything went back together. Threw some paint on there, and then I was ready to start replacing the rocker panels and doing rock sliders. Here's what my old rock sliders looked like. They were really strong and they were welded to the frame, but they had to come off in order to put frame stiffeners on, so I took the opportunity to get more ground clearance. When I dented the frame and got the frame stiffeners, I knew I wanted to do the rock sliders at the same time. So I went to the steel scrapyard and picked up these 2 pieces that were just long enough for really cheap, and I capped the ends. The back is flat and the front is angled. Out of the extra scraps that I got, I made these brackets that weld to the frame and to the rock slider. I knew I wanted them to be really strong, so I used 1/4 inch for some of them, and others I used 3/16. I made 8 of them. Here you can see, cut out the rocker panels. You cut along the top, and you cut just on the back side of the pinch seam, and then you just stuff in the 2x6 tube and weld it up. It is a lot of welding, and you're welding thick metal to thin metal, so you have to be very careful not to burn through. Here you can see welded it along the back. I chose to weld it flat, flush with the wheel well to leave room for bigger tires if I want to do that in the future. Here's the front. You can see I left a tab on the front fender and screwed it into the rock slider in order to keep the front fender from flapping around in the wind. When you cut off your pinch seam, you also cut off the lower mounting bolt for the front fender. Here you can see the final weld. It doesn't have to be pretty, but if you don't cut far enough back, you will see it when your door is closed. But it's nothing that a grinder can't fix, and as long as it's strong, it doesn't really matter what it looks like. Here's it prepped for paint. I made sure to clean everything up with a wire wheel and a flap disc in order to make sure that the paint sticks, but I do plan on scraping it off on rocks, so it's not that big a deal. I'm always gonna be able to go back and touch it up and cover up whatever scratches or dents I put in it. Here's the final product after paint. I think it turned out really well. My hope is that these will last forever, that I won't even be able to dent them. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you've done something similar. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please ask me any questions you might have, and hope to see you in the next one.